Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Semi Pro. I am joined by Josh and Daniel this morning as we talk about Max Payne.
What's this movie about again?
We're going to start playing a game on the podcast called Will Daniel Talk Over the Intro Music?
What's this movie about again?
It's about a man who's in Max Payne.
Me?
It's about Dalton getting me to not watch Obi-Wan Kenobi instead talk about Max Payne.
No, this one wasn't my idea. This movie was not my idea. I have some doozies on the list of ideas. This was not one of mine.
Yeah, I wonder who came up with this one.
Yeah, Dalton.
I think it was like Itzum or something. I think
Itzum suggested it, but Josh pushed for it pretty hard.
Well,
No, I don't think Josh encouraged for this movie at all. I think he actively advocated against it.
The whole Marky Mark Sweep was Josh's idea.
No, I don't think so.
Nah, that wasn't me. That was
because it's all because he wanted to watch the happening.
Well,
no, that doesn't sound like Josh.
That came about because me and Dan wanted to punish you for trying to make us watch bad Christian movies,
which we didn't even do, and now here we are watching Max Payne. Here we are watching we've watched two bad Christian movies in the Marky Mark Sweep so far.
True.
Oh,
we love Max Payne.
Do we? I haven't played the game. Josh has played the game,
now?
so.
I'm the only one who's played the game. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter at all because it's so inconsequential to the game that.
Daniel, did you catch it? He just said "E2."
What?
When he said "at all" doesn't matter at all, he said "E2."
Did you know that Ludacris is in this movie?
I did. I saw him when I watched it.
Mr. Chris is in this movie. I don't like this movie. I don't like anything about this movie. I just watching it felt like I was having some kind of seizure, really. It's Max Payne. The whole basis of the games is just man's wife and kid get murdered, neo-noir mystery. And that's kind of it. You know, he does
the Punisher.
Right, it's the Punisher, but he does a bit of like narration and
it's a bit of trolling.
It has a bit of trolling, and it's all a bit stylized and fun.
This movie feels like what would happen if I watched The Punisher. What's a good movie that Mark Wahlberg is in?
Max Payne.
So if I watched The Punisher, Transformers, and Blade Runner in the same night and then went into a coma, this is the dream that I would have in my coma.
Dalton, what's a good Marky Mark movie? Transformers.
Transformers.
It was the first one that popped in my head as far as Mark Wahlberg movies go.
Mark, when you think about Marky Mark's track record, he really doesn't have a good one. There's Boogie Nights and that movie that just came out about him being like a priest and a criminal or something that I think he is meant to be good in. And then other than that, Father Stu, that's the one. And other than that, it's just been The Happenings and the Max Paynes and the Planet of the Apes of the world.
The Departed, not bad.
Yeah, but he's not in The Departed.
He's kind of like a minor part in that.
All right, okay.
There's the other guys.
Let me rephrase. This movie is like if I watched, I can't remember the other two movies, Blade Runner, The Punisher, and Ted 2 all in one night, and then slipped into a coma. And when I'm in my coma, this movie would be the dream that I had.
Yeah, sure.
I don't like this movie. We watched this movie last night, and I still just barely understand what happened in it because the movie does not want to tell you anything about itself.
Here's the plot, and we're gonna break down the plot, and so it may shine through. I don't know. You don't find out anything about this movie until the end of the second act, beginning of the third act. You don't figure out what's happening at all, which is kind of a staple of like the neo-noir murder mystery detective stories. But this movie doesn't give you anything to bite on. You don't get to see Max Payne and his wife, Mrs. Payne, before she's murdered, or his kids before she's murdered. You don't get to meet them. You just kind of dropped into the middle of this sullen guy. You just dropped into the middle of his life, and you don't know what to make of it. You don't know if you're supposed to like him. You really don't, because he's not a very likable character. And we keep getting introduced to these side characters time after time again, some of which I really like, and they're instantly killed off. Nobody's in this movie for more than 15 minutes other than Mark Wahlberg and maybe Mila Kunis, if she's in it for that long.
They just, first off, he's not a likable character. He's just not a character. Everyone in this movie is one-dimensional. They just have one
Well,
thing
no,
about that
Josh.
character,
This movie
and
was
that's it.
released in 3D.
But like Marky Mark's thing is, I want to find the guy who killed my wife and kid. Mona Sax's thing is, and that's her name in the movie. That's Mila Kunis' name.
Come on, man. What's her real name?
She wants to find who murdered her sister. The bad guy just wants to push drugs. The other bad guy just wants to take drugs. And then everyone else in the movie does not matter, and I can't remember any of their names. I don't even know what Ludacris's name in the movie was.
It was
It
Luda.
was Chris, Luda.
Luda. When I was 13. All right, let's do the plot.
Yeah.
Let's start breaking this thing down. And if you're listening, I say if you're listening, just keep in mind that this is a pretty detailed, accurate plot breakdown. So if you're confused, that's how confused we were.
Imagine
watching
how
Max Payne.
we felt.
Right. So we open with Mark Wahlberg, aka Max Payne, drowning in a lake. And he's drowning, and there's some voiceover narration. He says, "I don't believe in heaven. I believe in pain." And then we cut back 1 week earlier to the cold case office where Max Payne works. I think the idea is they may have said this in the movie and I missed it. I think he was transferred there so that he could continue working on his wife's murder, because it's been 3 years and now it's a cold case file. That's what I'm thinking. Then we're introduced to this guy who I was absolutely convinced was the bad guy.
This character who appears in the movie and disappears within the same scene.
Like he feels like he's being set up. Me and Josh were talking about it. Like, well, what is this character gonna be? He's either gonna be the bad guy or he's gonna be the buddy cop. Like he's gonna be the
one who gets roped into this, and he tries to make Max see the right way. But
Why did you think that? Because I started watching this movie halfway through, as I seem to continuously do with these Marky Mark films. So I didn't see this character at all. What made you think that he was going to be either a bad guy or a crucial role?
The way that these movies go is they introduce a character, and then like he's the audience standing. You know, he comes
usually
in.
When a character is introduced, they are in the movie. Is that what you're getting at?
I think
usually when a character is introduced, they actually do something with them.
We thought that he was going to be a main player in this movie because we've seen a movie before. And when you have the new guy who's entering the cold case lab for the first time, and like he's being shown around and he's introduced to your main character, typically that means that he's going to have a role in the movie.
You see, your problem is you're thinking about this as if it's a movie, which it is not.
Right.
So this movie, I'm convinced this movie was some kind of like insurance fraud scam. Like they just had a load of money that they needed laundering, and they're like, yeah, put it in the movie. It's Max Payne. No one's going to see this.
And no one did.
And no one did, and it was completely inconsequential, and nothing changed in the world.
So this character, what did we call him? Just Detective Man?
We didn't call him anything, because he was gone by the time that we started talking about him.
Well, we talked about him for much longer than he was in the movie, because we thought he was going to be a main character. So then we jump ahead sometime after Max Payne is introduced to this man. And Max Payne is just in a subway station, and we get some cool Punisher stuff where there's some drug dealers or whatever, and Mark Wahlberg followed them while the guy pawned his watch, and then he bought the watch that the guy pawned, and then the guy was like, "Hey, that's a nice watch. Looks just like one I lost." And Mark Wahlberg or Max Payne was like, "Yeah, guy, this is the one you pawned. I bought it," or whatever. And then he kills them. Except for one of them gets away. And this is where we're introduced to the drugs, but we don't know what the drugs are yet. We just know that they're drugs. And this man is tripping, and he starts to see these demon bats, and they corner him on a train track, and he gets hit by a train. That's the scene. It doesn't make sense. It's confusing, and it doesn't tie to the next and or previous scene, which you will notice is a recurring theme in the movie Max Payne. So after the shadow bats kill a man, Mark Wahlberg goes to a party with a guy with big glasses, who is another character who I would have liked to have seen more of, who we never see again. He goes to a party and he finds this girl who with the same tattoo as the druggies, and he begins to question said woman, takes her home, presumably to sleep with her. She wants to sleep with him, but then
so he's at the club and he's like spying and he's trying to investigate, and then the main bad guy of the movie, who we didn't realize was the main bad guy in the movie at this point, like walks up to him and sort of just stares at him. So she does a loop and then walks up to him, pretends to be his girlfriend or whatever.
I remember, because she walked around the entire complex just to get back. She walks out the back door and then walks up next to Mark Wahlberg at the front door. So she just looped around the whole place.
And then she's like, "Hey babe, where you been?" And then they walk off back to his apartment instead of just like outside the club. And she pretends, she like tries to be like, "Oh, you can pretend I'm your wife if it makes you feel better." And he just tells her to get out. And then she's gone. That's it. Every person in this movie exists for one scene and then they're gone.
Well, this girl is in 2 scenes because she gets dead, like the bats killer, or so we think, because she's also taking the drugs, and so she dies. At some point during this whole thing, she stole Max Payne's ID card, like his detective ID, and she leaves it, or it's at the crime scene when she is scattered into a million little pieces. Then this other cop, who we also, because at this point we're still a little naive, we also thought that this cop was going to be a main character. His name is Alex. So he finds the ID, and he comes and he picks up Max Payne, and then he takes him to the crime scene just to show him the fact that he found the ID at the crime scene. And then they leave the crime scene and go to a bar where Max Payne yells at him for not being able to solve his wife's murder. So it turns out these two were partners. They were working on her murder together. Max Payne, when neither of them could figure it out, Max Payne went to Cold Case Files, and Alex stayed as a regular detective. And that's kind of the tension between the two of them. So Alex feels bad about not being able to solve the murder. He pulls out some old files. He figures out there's a connection between Marky Mark's wife's death and this lady's death and the other deaths that have been happening, which I would assume is a connection that Max Payne would have made, given it's about the tattoos and he was hunting down people with the tattoos. I don't understand why that needed, like, why Max Payne didn't figure that out already, despite the fact that the movie presents it as he figured it out.
Max Payne is the worst detective to ever exist. It's no wonder he couldn't solve his wife's murder.
It's pretty bad. Like, he's pretty bad at detectiving.
He also, like, I mean, he gets his wallet stolen by Natasha's her name, the woman from the club, and he just doesn't realize.
No.
Which you think he'd, like, especially since he goes into work the next day, you think he must realize, oh, it's missing. It was probably that woman that came around my house and acted really weird.
Right. So Alex dies. Mark Wahlberg comes home after getting a message from Max Payne at the office. So he comes home to see Alex murdered in his apartment. So Alex is dead. This character who I would have really liked to have seen more of. It's the actor who played Harvey Bullock in Gotham. He was in some other stuff. He is not a very good actor, but he's certainly the most likable character in the movie so far.
Well, he's trying, you know?
Yeah, he's doing his best. He's doing about as good as Mila Kunis.
Don't insult him like that.
And then the worst fight I've ever seen in a movie happens. Daniel, I'm sad that you missed this. I should have rewound it so that you could see it.
I'm not. I'm glad I missed it.
Like, it's just like it's a
It is
collection of
so
cuts and close-ups of Mark Wahlberg's face with some scenes that are just red put in between them, like some like quick cuts of just red. It's horrible. Like, it's so bad.
you don't know like I get that they were going for a confusing tone, but this wasn't confusing. It was more epilepsy inducing.
Like, it reminds me of, the meme scene from Taken where it's like 1,000 cuts just for Liam Neeson getting over one fence. It reminds me of that, but worse somehow.
Unironically.
Yeah, it's worse than that. Um, and then this also gets a little confusing because the bad guy, who we find out later, his name is Lupino, I think.
Lupino, yes,
Lupino?
Jack Lupino.
Yeah, Jack Lupino. We find out that he was the one who killed Alex. And we find out later in the movie that his whole thing is like decapitating people. And we see that Alex's head has been chopped off of his body. But they don't do that to Max Payne for some reason. Probably because he's the main character and he needs to live. So he wakes up in a hospital where they came to Max Payne's house to find Alex and found Max Payne also beaten on the floor, not dead, which raises suspicions, as it would. And then Chris O'Donnell shows up somehow.
He shows up and he's got hair, so I really caught me off guard.
Yeah, he's got like a full head of hair, no buzz cut. And he
This
shows
isn't
up.
Robin. He's moved on from being Robin. Now he's in really bad video game adaptations.
Right. It's like someone else who did that.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Really?
And then we meet Jeff Bridges' brother, Beau Bridges, whose name in this movie is
Character is
BB,
BB.
which stands for Beau Bridges.
Right.
And he's probably the best acted character in this movie. He's the only one who I have anything to latch on to because Max Payne gives us nothing.
Right. Max Payne is just he's a cardboard stand-in basically the entire movie. Like he doesn't have any emotion. He's constantly scowling. He's a complete idiot. So I don't know how he made detective. And then he's also not even that good a guy because he doesn't save anyone. And he just constantly walks into places and shoots people without thinking about it.
Right, as one does.
It's very bizarre that he's the main character of the movie. Yet, I mean, even BB has more of a presence than he does. And maybe that's just because it's Jeff Bridges' brother, so there's a little bit of carry on from there. But like,
we like this guy because we like his brother in other movies. That's what Max Payne has drug us to. We don't like this character because we like this character, or even because we like this actor. We like this character because we like this actor's brother in other movies. I need you to understand where Max Payne got us to.
This is what we're clawing for here. We're clawing for scraps. We're clawing for. This is Jeff Bridges' brother. Jeff Bridges is in good things. I can focus on that. That's about it.
So Jeff Bridges' brother just basically introduces us to the office where Mrs. Payne worked. And she worked here with him. Beau Bridges is now head of security. He mentions it like 6 times. Gives some exposition about Mrs. Payne. And then they go to Alex's funeral, where Alex's wife slaps Max Payne in the face and says that it's his fault, which it really isn't. Like, Alex was just doing his job. And then we leave Alex's funeral and Max Payne gets interrogated by Ludacris.
Well, no, okay. I just want to talk about how stupid this funeral scene is. You can't do it about every scene because then we'd be here for the next 3 days.
Every scene in this movie is the same. It's like 45 seconds and then we jump to the next one.
So he's with BB. BB takes him to the woman's house. He walks in, she slaps him, and then he walks out. There's nothing more to the scene. You don't learn anything. You just learn his wife hates him for her husband doing his job and being killed in the line of fire.
She says something along the lines of like
if everyone around Max Payne dies or something,
which is true. She's
Well,
not
well,
wrong.
Yeah,
yeah.
usually because Max Payne is killing them.
Usually because Max Payne's either shooting them
Getting them
just
shot.
or they just kind of happen to die. It's not even Max Payne's fault. The three people in this movie that I care about dying, who are close to Max Payne, are all killed by external sources that have nothing to do with Max Payne.
They're all killed by the writer's room. So we leave the funeral very quickly. Ludacris actually shows up at the funeral to take Max Payne to interrogate him, and he does it. And he starts interrogating him. And this is at first we think like, oh, Ludacris is this like cop who wants to go after Max Payne. He's gonna be like one of the like he's the B plot bad guy. But then it turns out the interrogation was fake because Bo Bridges was paying Ludacris to interrogate him so that Max Payne would. It's presented in the movie at this point so that Max Payne would quit investigating this and move on with his life. That doesn't work because Max Payne breaks into Ludacris and or someone else's office to steal some files. I think it's Alex's office. He breaks into Alex's office to find
Right?
the
Yes. Yeah.
files
He
that
walks
got
through the
Alex murdered.
homicide thing. He walks through the homicide thing straight to his door, and then people just try and kill him because they think he killed Alex, even though that's not how. I mean, policing in this universe, I'm convinced this movie is a prequel to Judge Dredd, where you don't actually need evidence or court or anything like that. It's just the police officers are going around murdering whoever they want because they think that they did it.
That's just the country that this movie takes place in.
The country of New York.
That's just New York. So, but the way it's presented is like nobody tries to kill him at first. Everybody's just mad at him because they think he killed him. I don't know why they think he killed Alex when it's very clear that somebody chopped Alex's head off and then beat Max Payne to a pulp. But anyway,
Right,
he steals the files.
It doesn't matter. Like he was Alex's partner and his best friend, and they constantly talked about how Alex and him were still like kind of okay.
No, they haven't. They haven't spoken since Max Payne went to Cold Case. Like they haven't spoken since then. This was the first time they had spoken since, and he winds up dead. Max Payne, he gets the files, and then he jumps out a window. And this is the point when you looked at me and said, he's just Batman at this point. And he is. He's just worse Batman if you mix Batman with the Punisher.
He jumps out a window on like the third or fourth floor of a building and just disappears. Like
yeah, I could do that.
I know he's got like a leather black trench coat, so maybe he used that like Batman and just broke his fall. But I don't. Nothing.
He tucked and rolled.
He does. He just like he dived, 10 out of 10 landing, right? Yeah. Knees squared out, boom, right flat.
We pretty much immediately cut. We pretty much immediately cut after him jumping out the window to him. I think he's walking somewhere, or maybe he's driving somewhere. I don't remember. Anyway, he gets kidnapped by Mila Kunis, and this is our introduction to her character, Mona Sax. Where Mila Kunis, she grabs Max Payne, she holds Max Payne at gunpoint. Basically, she thinks that he killed the woman earlier, the woman who was dead in the alley with his ID card. That's a reasonable assumption to make. She's an assassin. That girl was her sister. So she thinks Max Payne did it. Max Payne tries to explain like, hey, I wouldn't do that. I'm a homicide detective. I wouldn't leave my ID at a murder scene. I'm smart enough not to do that. That convinces her.
Well, I'm convinced that Max Payne's also lying because he clearly doesn't. He clearly would do that since he forgot to take it with him to the police station that he works at.
Well, semantics. Mila Kunis holds Max Payne at gunpoint. Mila Kunis and Max Payne form this like alliance to try and track down the guy who killed the woman. Because it's clear to both of them at this point, or it's at least clear to Max Payne, that the same guy who killed this girl is the guy who killed his wife. So they decide to try and track down this guy who killed Mona Sax's sister, which she should know, given her involvement with the drug ring, who it was who killed her sister.
Well,
but she doesn't.
Her involvement seems to be very like hit and miss. Like one scene she'll seem to know everything about it, and then the next scene she's basically less knowledgeable than Max Payne. But she has like cops that work for her, but then also doesn't and is pretty low down in the crime ring. This movie doesn't present you with anything. The movie just kind of shows things and expects you to understand what it's talking about until
This
the last
movie
act, and then
has
it goes.
scenes and none of them connect to each other.
None of
Right.
them whatsoever.
And this is the part you haven't seen, Daniel. And these are pretty good notes. Like these are, Josh, can you confirm that these are pretty
No,
solid?
Dalton's right. These are like what he's saying is exactly what happens in the movie. What happens in the movie just doesn't connect to anything.
So Max Payne starts questioning Mila Kunis about a man named Owen Green. They agree to go track down Owen Green. So we pull up to Owen Green's like
Wait,
crack
why
house
do you keep saying his name like that?
because they say it, and it's one of the only names I can remember because I wrote it out.
Mm.
They say it about 15 times.
Yeah. So we pull up to this crack house where Owen Green is staying. It's the dingiest, like, impacted apartment you've ever seen in your life in New York City. So it's every apartment in New York City.
It's about it probably going
It's
for about
the best apartment in
$400,000.
New York City.
Right.
You know, it probably cost them about $500,000 to live there.
Least
Per
dirty
week.
apartment in New York City. So they track down Owen Green. They find him in his apartment. Max Payne pulls a gun on Owen Green, but Owen Green is tripping on mystery drug. And as he's tripping on mystery drug, they're trying to talk him, like, because they want to question him. And then a demon pulls him out a window. It was the drug demon, so he just jumped out the window. But it's presented as he's pulled out the window.
Yeah, so until this point in the movie, we were talking about this. We didn't know because we've been seeing these shadow things through the druggie's eyes.
Oh
all the
man, I
time.
see those all the time.
But like we didn't know if they were hallucinations or real, and this seemed to say that they were like genuine and like real things, but they just aren't at all.
Right. Because the guy, Owen Green, is like, he's holding onto the brick wall and like his fingernails have chipped off and it like he's being pulled, but he's just
Yeah,
not.
but I mean, you've seen Fight Club though.
I guess
you
that's
can
true.
do that.
I guess that's true.
Yeah, you know what, Daniel, you're right. This movie's basically just Fight Club.
This movie is as good as Fight Club.
This movie is as good as any David Fincher movie.
True.
So after this, we cut pretty much immediately after Owen Green falls onto a car. We cut pretty much immediately to our bad guy, who is Lupino, just torturing a man. It's not a man who we've seen before. It's not a man who has anything to do with the plot, other than the fact that it's setting up that Lupino, our bad guy, likes to torture people by cutting their heads off and giving them drugs. So he gives them drugs, cuts their heads off, and that's the scene. We're there, and then we cut away. That's pretty much it. Mila Kunis, aka Mona Sax, then visits a mob boss to try and figure out where she needs to go. This mob boss talks in pretty much like just heaven and hell allegories. And he's basically talking about how the devil is building his army or something. And she's like, well, who's the devil? And he's like, I can't tell you that. And then she says, what do you know about Max Payne? And he says, Max Payne's bad news. Everybody who's around Max Payne winds up dead.
And he says Max Payne's the devil.
I don't think he says that. He should.
He doesn't, but he implies it.
Yeah. And then we just cut away from that scene to Max Payne.
That scene's over.
That scene's over. So now Max Payne is visiting a storage unit. And I remember asking Josh while we're watching this, like, did we set up a storage unit? Whose storage unit is this? And he said, it's nobody's. It's nobody's storage unit. Because by this point, Josh had begun to lose it.
This was the point where I started to realize that this movie was never going to make sense and nothing was ever going to be connected to anything else. Characters would just know things and then not be able to tell us how they know things. I also, the storage unit says like Cogliettes or something, and it just made me laugh because it's the most stereotypical Italian name that you could think of. Like, oh, this is Venucci's Pizza.
But you thought it was like a mob boss's storage unit, but turns out it's the police department's.
I thought it was like a some sort of scrapping car lot where a mob boss would hang out and Max Payne was going to go and interrogate a guy to find out some form of information in this movie so that the audience could know something was going on. And he doesn't. He finds some files and he goes, something was... What was the line? Oh, I always thought that I must be missing something, but it turns out something was missing.
Yeah. So it wasn't the police department's files. I was wrong about that. It was the company where Mrs.
Acer.
Payne worked.
Acer.
Acer, yeah. And so he goes
Like the gods, get it?
right.
Acer,
Like
like
the
the
gods
computer.
from Norse mythology.
Right. So he
Get
goes
it?
to talk to Beau Bridges, and he finds out some of the files are missing, and he says that line that Josh just so beautifully said. I thought I was missing something, but turns out something was missing.
Is that the real line that he says?
Yes, that's
a
real.
genuine line.
That's true.
That's genuine.
Man.
Then Max Payne buys a subway ticket because we're done with that scene. We're done in the diner. We're just going to jump to the subway. So he buys a subway ticket to visit his old house, like where he lived with his wife and daughter. This is where Daniel came in. He visits his old house. We flash back to his wife's murder, and that's pretty much that scene. It goes yellow for a bit, which is a nice contrast to the blue that this movie is constantly presenting.
The blue and red.
Yeah, it's everything is blue or red, and then now it's all yellow. They put
It's a very
Put
bright
the Mexico Middle East filter on.
Right. And that's that scene. It's over. Like we're introduced. We're in his old house, and then we leave his old house. Nothing happens. Then Marky Mark decides to go and question Chris O'Donnell, who works at Acer, worked with his wife. So he goes to question Chris O'Donnell, and he does so by breaking into his office before Chris O'Donnell gets there. Or doesn't break in, he just walks in, I guess. Because
I think that's how you're supposed to question someone.
Well,
right. But the
he
secretary
stands very
knew.
ominous. Yeah, he stands very ominously in his office, just staring at a painting. And someone's like, "Hey, someone's in your office," as if they didn't background check this guy. Apparently, meetings aren't a thing. You just walk in and expect him to eventually arrive.
She did say he's a detective, so she knew something.
I like to imagine.
I will say, I don't think it's a good thing, but from what I saw and have heard you guys saying about this movie plays out like a video game.
Right.
In the way that it's just it doesn't make sense and everything is just.
Well, yeah, it does play out like a video game
nonsense.
from the 2000s, which Max Payne was. But
Right.
the Max Payne video game is much more like a graphic novel. Like you'll play through a mission and then it will go to a cutscene, and the cutscene's just comic panels with a noir overtone to it. But this movie, it skipped out on all of the noir stuff and tried to just do scenes that don't connect to each other.
Well, it tried to get away with just doing a voiceover, and that being the noir stuff. But it only does it at the beginning. It doesn't do it throughout the whole movie.
If it hadn't, I think this movie with a narration would be much better because
in
fact, I almost think that they probably tried to do that, and then some studio executive shut it down and said it feels too old timey.
Or they probably thought like, oh, we tried that with Blade Runner, and everyone hated it, so let's don't do that here.
Right, but like a narration would solve basically every issue here because it would tell the audience where Max Payne's going and his like inner thoughts and how he knows stuff and something about the movie. But no, instead you just get Marky Mark staring at a wall waiting for Chris O'Donnell to come in. And I like to imagine that Max Payne was there for a good few hours, and every time the secretary came in to say like, "Oh, I'm sorry, he'll be here soon, I'm sure," he started doing his monologuing thing because he just
said,
he was there.
"I don't believe in heaven.
I don't believe in
I believe
heaven.
in pain and death.
My wife and child were murdered.
I'm looking for my wife's murderer. Why are you here, Max Payne? I need to question Chris O'Donnell." So Chris O'Donnell comes in.
Find answers.
Chris O'Donnell comes in and he starts questioning him by just punching him in the face. There's one point where he's literally about to talk, and then Max Payne punches him in the face again so that he can't.
He's
I remember that scene.
He's mid-answer, and he's like, "Your wife worked for us. She was doing this thing," and then he punches her.
Yeah,
right. And he gives him a concussion, and he can't keep telling him.
Then Chris O'Donnell says, "We need to take that file that is just conveniently on his desk." Why didn't Max Payne search his desk? He's a detective. He says, "Grab that file, and then we've got to get out of here because they're going to kill me." Then the SWAT team shows up, which we find out is the security for this business, which is kind of shady, but we're just more confused at the moment. like in retrospect, oh, that makes sense. that was a setup, but it's really confusing at the moment. The SWAT team, they take out Chris O'Donnell, like they just shoot that man. Max Payne escapes somehow, and there's some slow motion. It's probably the best action scene in the movie. Like there's some good shooting and whatnot.
But
Ludacris is there.
It's very like smooth. A lot of the other action scenes in this movie very shaky and quick, and nothing really happens. But this is all in slow motion. There's some solid stunts in it. Like people get shot and then go flying over 3 tables.
Well, everyone that gets shot goes flying. Like
Yeah,
halfway
everybody
across
in
the
this
room.
movie.
It's kind of cool. I liked it. I liked it.
That was my
It did
favorite
really
artistic
funny
bit of
and
this
quirky.
movie.
Right. Again, it
Ludacris-
made it feel like a video game.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Ludacris shows up, and lets Max Payne escape and tells the SWAT team like, "Oh, what'd you do? You let him escape." When he's the one who just let him go. But that's because Ludacris is the only good guy in this whole movie. Max escapes, and in the file is a tape of Lupino talking about the drug. Turns out that Acer was involved with the drug the whole time, the company where Max Payne's wife worked. They were basically making a drug for soldiers to make them stronger and less fearful in the war. But in doing so, only like 1% of them were stronger and less fearful. The rest of them saw demon bats. Which seems a horrible side effect for your drug.
Did they all see demon bats? Like, even if they were stronger?
Yes, but some of them didn't get...
Not all of them got attacked, yeah.
Right. Some of them got really scared. Some of them thought the demon bats were helping them.
Basically, this drug was PCP, I think.
Right.
But also, it didn't seem very much like the demons were hunting them or anything. It just kind of happened. It happened at random. There's the one guy in the subway at the beginning of the movie who he's taken the drug. They're showing to be like shaking from withdrawals or something, and then they don't take any more. They go to confront Max Payne. One of them runs away and then starts seeing demons just before he's hit by a train. And
right, much like when you're on PCP.
I'm assuming they see
Right.
the demons the whole time. It's just when the demons start to attack them that they die.
I guess.
Because they all get the tattoo they all get the tattoo of the bird. We skip the tattoo shop scene. They get the tattoo of the bird wings, which is supposed to protect them from the demons, if they have it, but it doesn't protect all of them. And then like the girl who died earlier, Mona Sax. Remember her? Her sister, when she dies, she's like, "Not yet." Like you were supposed to be. It's not time yet. And then she gets killed by the demons. And by that I mean she gets killed by Lupino, who just stands ominously over her. And he's in several scenes just kind of standing on rooftops looking down over the people he's murdered as the cops are circling the place.
My favorite is the Natasha one because he's standing on the rooftop when she dies, and then it's like a full day later and he's still in the exact same spot just staring at the police. So it doesn't even look like he did anything. He was just kind of bored and spying on people.
Yeah, he took a nap up there.
He also... Lupino, despite in the movie so far being presented as the bad guy, he doesn't even feel like the bad guy. He feels like the bad guy's main henchman.
Right. He feels like the muscle. Like he's the guy who the bad guy hires to take everybody out.
I guess he kind of was.
He was. No, that is correct.
Yeah.
But the movie presents him as the main bad guy, which makes you think,
right.
Oh, there's another bad guy. So it kind of takes the whole twist ending thing out of it.
Right, it's like, oh, okay, so it is a standard movie.
Right. And so Mila Kunis and Max Payne, they watch the tape. Max Payne says he's going after Lupino. Mila Kunis says, "You can't, you'll die." Lupino is standing on a rooftop and he takes some more drugs to make him stronger for when Max Payne shows up. How he knows Max Payne is coming, I don't know. And so Max Payne, he hunts him down, and then he tries to kill him, and he is losing, and so BB actually winds up shooting Lupino and saving Max Payne's life. Then, in this attempt to escape, we find out that turns out the whole time Lupino was or BB was the guy who killed Max Payne's wife. He did it, and he hired Lupino to be his muscle as he spread this drug throughout the streets to make more money. Head of security, BB.
Right.
So then they try to put Max Payne in handcuffs, and they try to tie him to a weight to throw him in the frozen lake.
And he morphs out of his
The
handcuffs.
handcuffs disappear, and he starts to run away. And then he just jumps in the lake himself.
Right, and they go, yeah, that's good enough.
Right, BB says, he'll freeze to death. And he almost does.
Just watch. Just, stick around and watch for a minute.
Right, they don't. They just turn around and leave. Like, he's in the lake. He's either going to drown or freeze to death in minutes. Just let him do that.
Or he's going to swim back. Just get that confirmation,
All you got to do is sit there. 15 minutes. What do you have to do?
Immediately after, he's like, he's going to drown. Leave him. And they walk away. He pops back up. He surfaces and you can see his head. If they waited for 5 minutes, they go,
if they just turned around a split second after walking away, they would have seen silly little Marky Mark's head pop out of the Boston Harbor.
In my notes it just says Max Payne drowns, and then the next note is Max Payne survives the drowning. So Max Payne, he climbs back up onto the pier, and then he takes, because BB was trying to frame him for having these drugs, so he stuck drugs in his pocket, and he takes the drugs, the demon drugs, and then the snowflakes turn into fire, and he just screams like he's a demon. And then we get a lot of very comical shots of him, his drug POV, where it's just his face on a GoPro, and it's all rounded and fish-eyed.
It's that one Weekend meme where he's walking through things.
And then this guy's about to kill Max, and Mila Kunis, Mona Sax shows up and kills that guy. So she came to help out Max. And then Max Payne just blows through a bunch of dudes to get to the top of this building where Beau Bridges is waiting on his helicopter that doesn't show up ever. And then Max Payne shoots Beau Bridges. The SWAT team shows up to arrest Max Payne, and the cut to credit scene of this movie is Max Payne sitting on this rooftop with an entire SWAT team pointing their guns at him, even though it's presented that he's not the bad guy, but he's definitely going to jail for killing all of those people.
Well, no, but then he didn't, because then there was a post-credit scene where he's just the Spider-Man No Way Home Venom scene where he's just in a bar.
This movie invented the post-credit scene. Came out before Iron Man.
I just don't think that's true.
Iron Man also wasn't the first movie to have a post-credit scene. We looked this up.
This movie also came out after Iron Man. So here's my theory with the post-credit scene. Now, the post-credit scene is very simple. Max Payne goes into a bar. Mona Sax is there. She's got some files about the lady who runs Acer.
Right, yeah, no, I don't think we mentioned her at all.
Because she's inconsequential to this movie.
It showed a lady in a limousine a couple times giving orders on the phone, and that was apparently the main bad guy from the video games, and was meant to be set up as the bad guy later.
She was running the whole thing, right? She was Beau Bridges' boss.
She was Miss Acer. She was the Acer god.
And so he gets the files, and then he smirks at Mona Sax or whatever, setting up a sequel. I think this was probably the final scene of the movie, and then Iron Man came out, and it had the post-credit scene, and everybody was like, oh, that's cool, there's a post-credit scene. And so they're like, let's put a post-credit scene in Max Payne. And so they do. And they probably just snipped that right from after because the scene on the rooftop doesn't feel like the ending. It feels like there should be something else after that. I even said that when the credits started. I was like, there's no way this is the end.
The whole movie feels like there should be something else.
Well, that's true. Like a plot.
like a plot or characters or setting. Just something, anything.
So it sets up a sequel that we never got. When do you think it's going to come out?
So it's coming this year with Avatar 2.
So yeah, that's Max Payne. That's the plot of Max Payne.
Plot is
it's a very loose word. I'm using it very loosely, but that's the plot of Max Payne. It sucks. I can tell you that much. Um,
So I played the game. I played Max Payne 1 and a bit of Max Payne 2 leading up to this because I was like, I haven't played them in a while, and I'm curious about how much of the movie is going to be in this. Um, and as it turns out, the movie is a pretty, I don't want to say accurate, but it is a, it's like
it's certainly
someone
an
heard.
adaptation.
It's a
It's one of the
movie.
adaptations of
It's
all
like
time.
it's like someone described the game to someone else, and then they made a movie based off of that. Like the
Which, to be
characters.
fair, is probably what happened.
Right, exactly. I doubt. I know Marky Mark didn't play it because he said he was too scared of getting addicted to the game. And then he said that the guy who made this is one of the best directors he's ever worked with, which really tells you something. Um, but like the characters and the story kind of match up with the game. Like BB and Lupino and whatever the woman is, they're all characters in the game.
And Mona Sax.
And Mona Sax and Valkyrie is a thing. So is Lupino being a weird occultist kind of guy, and Acer is the
Does he cut
company.
off heads in the video game?
No, he just kind of runs a
0 out
church
of
with
10. Not playing it.
he kind of runs a church with a load of people in it that have cloaks on, and that's kind of it. And he has a weird eye tattoo,
That's
which
kinda
they
cool.
kept. But like, I mean, even Mona Sax's sister dying is in the game, but it's still very loose because it misses out. The biggest thing that Max Payne had going for it was its style. It had, bullet dodge where you could dive and shoot bullets in slow motion, which they do once in this movie, and then
Well, they
it,
do once in this movie, but it's like an entire scene that's
Yeah.
just in slow motion, and it
it's
really
the
takes
funniest.
away from the effect.
And the,
It's
the
the
whole
funniest
thing at
thing
the
I've seen.
end, the thing at the end when he takes the drugs just reminds me of Doom. When they did that in Doom, the same thing that they did in the Rock's Doom movie. This movie, the third act of this movie is just the same as the third act of the Doom movie, because it's this whole idea of, well, this thing is the plot of the video game where he just runs around and shoots thugs. So we have to do that here so that, like, in our third act, so that it feels like the video game.
But it's like there. I mean, presumably, and I mean, I know that there were, after I started watching, there were other scenes of him shooting in which they didn't do the bullet time as much. Like they did it like once in the like SWAT shootout scene, the first
Well,
SWAT shootout scene.
Dan, you're forgetting. There's that one scene where he's with the shotgun and he like drops backwards and shoots up at the guy who's also shooting at him, and they use the same two shots for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he
Um,
finally shoots the guy.
Yeah, he finally gets him. But like,
But it's like I think the bullet time thing could have been neat if it had been done sparingly throughout the movie and
yeah,
not just crammed
use it-
into the last 10 minutes of the movie.
you use it twice, really. Like you use it once at the beginning to kind of show Max Payne's. You get, use it at the beginning to use a fun action scene to get people
Well,
actually
you could even
invested in
do
the
like you could do like the long compilation of it at the beginning if you want, like if you want to do like a like compilation of him just like fighting different criminals to show that he's all, thugged out and
Right,
depressed about
exactly.
Well,
his,
you could have
his
done a
wife being dead or
montage.
whatever.
You could have done you could open with his wife's murder and then cut to a montage of him just hunting down people to get to the point where we are now, instead of just
There are a
dropping
lot
us
of things you could have done with this movie that weren't
Right.
done.
And, I mean, we said this when we were watching the movie. What the movie presents as the main bad guy, Lupino, doesn't have any relation to Max Payne whatsoever throughout the entire film. Like he doesn't know who he is. He doesn't meet him.
he
Other than
does
that,
meet him.
well, other than that one scene of him staring at him, they don't know each other and they never see each other again until he kills him. And like what should have been happening is Lupino's this guy that Max Payne continually like bugs around, and he's like, I know you killed my wife, but he can't get enough evidence to legally prosecute him, so he starts going rogue and on a rampage and shooting criminals and stuff
Right, and doing cool bullet time stuff.
right, and calling and doing fun action scene things. I'd love to see the guys who made John Wick make this, because I think they
I'd love to see anyone competent make this.
The guys who made John Wick made this.
It's
It's
called
just
John
John Wick.
John Wick.
This is just a bad version of a 1,000 better movies that I've seen.
Well, the weirdest
This is the
thing for me,
blueprint.
the weirdest thing is that the game is just a noir, and you didn't do a noir. They did a visual style, but why not have the narration? Why not have
It was
an
a visual
actual
style, but it
dialogue?
was a really friggin' ugly visual
It
The
was,
style.
it was
movie
an
is
ugly
very
one.
ugly too. Like they're going for the neo noir, like everything is kind of smoky and grainy and blue and whatever, but they didn't pull it off. Like Blade Runner is an example of a movie that pulled it off. Now, is that a fair comparison? No. Blade Runner had a significantly higher
You know,
budget than this movie
you're right,
had.
Dalton. You're right, Dalton. This movie's just not as good as Blade Runner. It tried, but
Yeah,
it's not as
true.
good as Blade Runner.
Right. And it also didn't have the budget and whatever. Um, but this movie's ugly. I said while we were watching, this movie feels like instead of feeling like I'm watching a movie, I feel like I'm scrolling through Mark Wahlberg's TikTok and like getting like a bunch of 20-second TikTok videos.
Yeah, it's basically just like a showcase reel of like, hey, look at the movie that we can make,
And it sucks and it's ugly
and it's
and I hate
bad.
it.
It's awful.
It's this is worse than Planet of the Apes. Planet of the Apes was fun. This Planet of the Apes compared to this movie is the best movie of all time. Uh
I,
I think that's going to be the trend with the Marky Mark sweep is
right.
everyone is going to make the next or the
I
last one look like godsend.
I have faith in Daddy's Home 2. I think Daddy's Home 2 is going to be a fun one. Like I
Daddy's Home
think
2 will at the very least make me laugh at least once on purpose.
right, it's
Right.
probably going to make me cry. But if it does, I'm sure I'll punish myself in some way.
It's the
I'm
this
very
movie,
much looking
like
forward to that happening. I will say that.
this movie may very well be the worst movie we've watched on the podcast outside of Godzilla versus Kong. Like as I'm thinking back to all of the things that we've watched over time, you know, Attack of the Clones was pretty bad, but this movie reminds me of Attack of the Clones. Doom 2005 is better than this one. Mortal Kombat 95 also didn't care for that one, better than this one. As I'm just like thinking back over all of the movies we've watched since we started doing this one's probably the worst one. It's probably a tie with Attack of the Clones, actually, the more I think about it. But it's
Well,
like
I say that, at least Attack of the Clones had characters. This movie doesn't even
well,
have
no, Attack of the Clones
characters.
does not have characters. Attack of the
No, no.
Clones and this movie are very,
No,
very similar.
Okay, Attack of the Clones had one good character, and it was the giant praying mantis.
Yeah, okay. So Attack of the Clones edges this movie out because it has a giant praying mantis in it.
But
Edges.
also, speaking of Attack of the Clones, I just want to remind people that we could be watching Obi-Wan right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead, we're
no, we
talking about
could.
Max Payne.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
those of you
you're
watching
welcome.
on YouTube next week, because these episodes go up a day or a week early on streaming platforms, and a week later on YouTube. We're recording this on the Friday that Obi-Wan was released officially, the first 2 episodes, and instead
And
of
none of
watching
us
it,
have watched it yet.
no, nobody has watched it because we're talking about Max Payne.
Max Payne. We're talking about a movie from 2008 that I don't even think Marky Mark remembers filming.
And that's the thing about this movie. I didn't know it existed. So there's that.
Like,
I
knew
wish I still didn't know that it existed.
Right. It's genuinely, this movie sucks.
okay, so I'm a big video game guy, right? That's my thing. The video games, the video games, and
Right, a video game enthusiast, as it were.
I'm a video game enjoyer.
Mm.
So I know a lot of different bad movie adaptations of video games. This is possibly the worst, and I say that having seen Mortal Kombat, because
Assassin's Creed is pretty bad.
Assassin's Creed is pretty bad, but at least keeps the core thing of the game.
I guess that's true.
There is at least an assassin in Assassin's Creed. This movie barely features Max Payne.
Max Payne is in every scene. He just doesn't have any sort of character or personality.
Right. As something that I can focus on, Max Payne is like a blur. In that every scene that he's in, I am focused on anyone who is not Max Payne instead of him.
This movie was made for $35,000. Wow,
35,000.
The gross this movie made at the box office Would anybody like to take a guess at how much this movie made?
$2.50.
15,000.
No, it made money. I mean, it made it made 40,000 at the box office. So,
it's more than it deserves.
More than it deserves. Opening weekend, it made $17,000.
I'd also like to say that the Postal movie had 15 million as its budget.
Right.
Is that true?
I'm pretty sure it was 15 million.
I feel like it. I feel like I told you that, but I may have been lying.
It's possible.
Oh no, I was not lying. That the actual budget for that is 15 million.
A little bit of trivia, really
Probably
quickly.
did not make as much
that money went to cocaine.
I just want to say, like, it went to J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the Max Payne movie now, and I've just seen that it had 2 writers. One of who was Bo Thorne, who hasn't really written anything since Max Payne or before Max Payne, and the other one was Sam Lake, who he was the writer and face model for every game that the guys who made Max Payne made.
The guy with the funny face.
It's really shocking. It's really shocking that the movie was as badly written as it was, considering that the guy who made the original game made it.
There is an unrated version of this movie that was released that we haven't seen.
Do you think, Josh, that guy actually had any say in the script of this movie, or do you think he was just credited as a script writer because it was based on his video game?
I think it's that. I think it's what Daniel said, for sure.
I'm just going off of IMDb. I'm just going off of IMDb, which doesn't say that, but that's also because no one has cared about Max Payne, so they haven't filled in anything on this, probably.
True.
I wonder what's in the unrated version then that makes this different, because this was
I think it's just more blood.
Probably more blood, more brutal. And then there's also this movie, much like Blade Runner, also has many cuts. There's a couple other cuts.
Blade Runner.
I really hope there's a cut out there that has narration over it so that I know what's happening. I hate narration in movies. Like, I think it needs to be used very, very sparingly. I don't think it ever really works. Unless it's like the Batman, where it's in pretty much the opening scene and maybe the end of the movie, and that's it. I don't think you should have narration in the middle of your movie because I don't like it. I would love it in this movie so that I know what's happening.
I still just, we didn't talk about the best part of the movie, which is when Max Payne goes to find Lupino, and he finds him at a club called Ragnarok.
Oh, we didn't talk about Ragnarok.
It's called what was it called again? Like the Dragon and the Rock or something.
Ragland and Brock or something.
Right.
And it's like a neon sign, and half the letters are faded out, so it just says Ragnarok.
Right, because get it? They're doing it's like a Norse mythology thing. They have the Acer and the oh yeah, I don't think, did we mention that the drug is called Valkyrie?
No, we didn't. We didn't mention any of that. We didn't mention any of the things. The drug is called Valkyrie. The club is called Ragnarok.
They were trying to go for.
Because it doesn't make any sense the way it's presented in this movie. It's it's a string of coincidences that happened.
Also, now that I'm reading through like a written version of this, so I can actually see what's happening more, I've realized that opening where he's in the subway is the entire first level of the game. Because
that's fun.
The first level of the game is Max Payne goes down to a subway to meet his friend DEA Alex Balder, and then Balder gets murdered and Max Payne gets framed for it, which I guess happens in this movie. They just kind of gloss over it. And then the next 15 missions is Max Payne stumbling across Lupino and the drugs and a theft and a robbery and a whole conspiracy that he tries to shut down.
So you've played the game, Josh, does the Norse god Acer Valkyrie theme, does that have like any significance in the games, or is that just a thing that they didn't do in this?
Valkyrie and Acer in the games, like Acer, they stay in the games the same way. There's no weird demons or like visual representation of the Valkyries, or like any kind of hallucination whatsoever. It's just kind of, it's very grounded, where it's like, oh, they're just called that because they're all in reference to Norse mythology. They don't try and pose it
actually trying to like make Norse mythology.
Yeah, like I say, the
Cool.
closest you get is one mission where you hunt Lupino through like a church, I think, and he's got this all occult stuff, and everyone's in cloaks, uh, and that's about it.
I was
And
going to
then
ask
you
the
just
same question because there's a 2012 short fan film called Max Payne Valhalla, and so I was just curious as to
Right, I
there's
mean, like it is a thing. It's just not what this game has made out to be the thing.
okay, cool.
I, also,
Right.
the woman who plays Natasha, Olga Kurylenko, I think her name is. She was in another really awful video game adaptation where the main protagonist is basically emotionless. She was in Hitman, which I didn't realize.
I thought you were gonna say she was in Resident Evil.
No, but the guy who
So
plays
that
his
also
part
has a lead who is just emotionless, but that's not done intentionally. I don't think.
intentionally,
I think that's just because the director's wife can't act.
I don't. uh, the guy who plays Max Payne's partner in this movie is in Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City, the best movie of all time.
Mid.
The video game adaptation web runs deep, and you could
And
probably
it
play like
shouldn't.
it shouldn't. You could probably play 6 Degrees of Separation with all of them.
I want to be done
The
talking
one
about
one
this.
good thing I can say about this movie is it made me kind of want to play the Max Payne games,
It didn't.
and
It made me want to.
that's it.
It made me want to never do anything ever again. Can we be done talking about this? It's making me sad.
I think we were done talking about this a while ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I would have been fine not talking about this while we were watching the movie.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. We've basically given final thoughts. We don't have to do that again. Next week, we will be watching Daddy's Home 2, starring Mark Wahlberg and Mel Gibson. And I'm so much more excited for that than I am. I'm so glad that this is done.
I can't wait for the week after. I'm so excited for the week after.
There are going to be some of these coming up as we go. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there are going to be some that are hard to sit through. I don't think any of them are going to be as hard to sit through as this one was.
I think there's going to be at least a few more that are going to be harder to
I
sit
can
through
think
than
of
the
a
rest.
whole week that's going to be
Yeah.
hard.
I think
this
there are
movie.
some that are going to be worse, but I think they'll be more enjoyable because there's nothing really to latch onto with this movie. So I think there will be some where at least there's something to talk about or something to something to either laugh at or latch onto. This movie has nothing. There's nothing to laugh at. There's nothing to enjoy. Mark Wahlberg doesn't do anything funny with his face other than just his face.
Right? I mean, he does have a pretty naturally funny face.
He doesn't even speak in his accent in this one. He just
No, he
speaks
doesn't
like
even
Christopher
talk
Walken.
like he's from Boston. He's doing a fake voice and it sounds like Christopher Walken. It's
Like,
bad.
my wife and kid were murdered.
That's how he talks the whole
So
movie.
what's his kid in this just named Baby? Because that was
Yes.
what was written on the
Yes,
door.
on his door was written baby, and that was the door to his bedroom, not the baby's room.
No, there was a crib in there. The baby just also has a full-size bed.
Yeah,
They were just planning
he's
ahead.
spoiling the kid. You know, it's the first kid, so they get spoiled. That's how it works.
All right, let's be done. I'm done.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm done.
All right, everybody. Thanks for
What's
watching.
this
Join us
movie
next
about
week.
again?
It was about Max Payne. Join us next
I'm
week.
in Max Payne.
Join us next week as we watch Daddy's
Or don't.
Home 2 on the very next episode of Semi Pro.